opportunities in leveraging information, infrastructures, the internet, and the digital ecosystem as a whole when tackling emergency situations. Participants will have up to 6 minutes each one to give their vision about these questions and describe their experience within these issues. After that, we'll have a Q&A, questions and answers, and an overarching debate with the audience. Without further delay, let's kickstart this session then. I'll give the floor to Ms. Ellison, please.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, and well, nice to be here with all these interesting people on this panel. I've got very little time, so I'm just going to start straight away by emphasizing that when we talk about critical infrastructure, we're not only talking about physical infrastructure, which is often the points made, especially in relation to developing countries and the bottlenecks that we face. We're also talking about the virtual infrastructure that is necessary, that are the critical assets of the economy and society. And so the question is really, what critical infrastructure has been in place in order to redress the problems associated with the pandemic and, of course, the lockdowns. And secondly, what can be done to address those. And I suppose the important point is to make is really to say how the COVID-19 pandemic and particularly the lockdowns that accompanied it have really compounded, digital inequality. I think we've long known that, digital inequality reflects structural inequality in society. But I think what we've seen with the pandemic, probably for the first time ever, is this compounding effect of digital inequality, so that those who are unable to digitally substitute for things that they can no longer, economic activities, schooling activities, banking activities, etc., that they can't do physically, are doubly disadvantaged by these circumstances. And so it becomes a real challenge for us to ensure that we have these critical infrastructures in place, and also, universal or comprehensive access to these infrastructures in place. So the problem is that actually a very, very small, minuscule proportion of the African total population of Africa have actually been able to mitigate the effects by digital substitution over the period of the lockdown, by getting their food online, getting even their grants, their social protection measures, even that has been challenged. In many cases, you've had to, with the complete lockdowns, very strict lockdowns we've had in some of our countries, you've had to make application for those grants online. So I think this is an absolutely critical issue, because in fact we have a lot of the physical infrastructure across many of the countries in Africa that have very low penetration rates. So, the least developed countries like Rwanda, which has a very good infrastructure, 90% of the population plus actually covered by broadband, and yet only less than 15% actually have access to the internet. So people, the signal is there, the infrastructure is there, but the human development challenges are there. Firstly, people can't afford it. Secondly, they don't have the skills. Thirdly, they don't have the devices, etc. So these are really important things that we have to acknowledge. Simply supply side measures is not enough. We have to do the demand side stimulation side of this as well. And then, of course, there is the question of, because of this increased demand, several countries, developing countries as well, South Africa included, put out a temporary spectrum to operators to deal with that demand. But this is really a lost opportunity in trying to get new kinds of services, experimenting with getting lower cost services to people who are already offline. The temporary spectrum was granted to the dominant players in the market, the big players in the market, mobile operators, and of course it should have been, because they're the people who could roll out these services. But there were a number of people, ISPs, community networks, etc., that also applied that didn't get these services. There was some TV white space, which was very positive, but really the opportunity to bring more people into the market, to make it more competitive, to make it more cost effective for people to come online was really a lost opportunity. And of course the mobile operators took the new spectrum, the additional spectrum, and set up 5G services, which very few people can access anyway, never mind during a pandemic. So we really have to focus on what supply side interventions we're looking at. And then to speak about the lack of penetration and the impact that has on the ability to use these technologies in order to manage the pandemic, in order to limit the pandemic. So in fact, the smartphone penetration penetration rate across Africa, but even in a country like South Africa, where you have between 50 and 60% internet penetration levels, there is not sufficient intensity of devices in order to make these contact tracing apps effective. And even less so in many other countries. So even countries like Kenya or Nigeria have 30-35% internet penetration. So even if you get half of those people online, you need about 60% of the population to have smartphones in order for these apps to be effective. So basically during the pandemic across Africa, they've at best resorted to manual contact tracing. And then of course, for those people who are online and are able to get onto, using the internet and they've been able to access the big social networks data, there's incredible problems with bias and representation and invisibility. If we've got less than 20% of our population online, the AI dashboards and things that we're using are really only telling us about what is happening with the elite. They're not telling us what is happening with the whole population. So this is a really big challenge for us as we try and prevent or create better critical infrastructure for the next pandemic. And then moving from the physical infrastructure, moving from the physical infrastructure to the issues. Of course, we've also got the issues of lack of data governance in many environments. So even the setting up of the contact tracing and the mass surveillance and that, very often there's not the human rights and data governance in place. And then, of course, once people are online, problems around cybersecurity not being in place, safety. And then, of course, because of all of these things, a lack of trust online. So these are really, really big issues. And I suppose the main point that I just wanted to say is that, a lot of the infrastructure bottlenecks are spoken about on the supply side, but it's really these governance issues. And these are, what we're talking about, internet, cybersecurity, access to data. These are now global public goods. And these need to be governed at a global level. And I think this really calls for global cooperation, country cooperation in order to address these issues and ensure that the weakest link in our global ecosystem is actually safe and protected for use. And we simply cannot go on doing the same things and hope that we get different results. We have to be very experimental in our policy. We've got to do things differently. We've got to do small and lots and opportunities and ensure that we actually bring the vast majority of Africans who are offline, online, effectively and meaningfully online.
Thank you so much, Alison. What a wonderful start for our section, bringing much more topics than the usual idea of that all that is important in this context is the infrastructure. I think that you bring much more topics for us to discuss during this session. Thank you so much for your contribution. I don't see if Mr. Americo Muchanga is with us. I think that he made it to connected, but we lost him. So if it's okay, we're gonna move for Mr. Hajime Onga, if it's okay for you to go, and then if Americo comes back, we put him in line again. Thank you so much. So Ms. Hajime Onga from the Telecommunications Bureau from the Ministry of International Affairs from Japan.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. Can you see my slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. Very pleasure to meet you all, and appreciate a lot for inviting me to this workshop. I'm Hajime Onga from Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, Japan. Today, I would like to share our experience for resilient telecom infrastructure enabled in emergency in Japan by focusing on the recent natural disasters. So just a moment. Okay. So as you might know, Japan is one of the disaster-prone countries, such as earthquake, typhoon, heavy rain, flood, tsunami, volcanic eruption. Those disasters have occurred more frequently and devastatingly than communications breakdown, spread over a wider area and for longer time than before. And the next page, okay. Just a moment. So sorry, not the next page, just before. Okay. So for example, last 3 years, so Hokkaido as you know, Eastern Iburi earthquake in September 2018, and the typhoon number 15 called Faxai in September last year, and the heavy rain event of July 2020 by Training. Then next page, just a moment. Okay. Can you see next page? Oh, page second, okay? Okay. Then, okay. This slide shows the main breakpoint or risks of telecom network, mainly for general resident in the case of natural disaster. For example, about mobile base station, which is destroyed by landslide, flood, or else. Also suspended by power outage or exhaustion of emergency power supply and fuel after power outage. And the second point is, as for backbone optical network, telecom building and relay station could be destroyed by landslide, flood, or else. Also suspended by power outage or exhaustion of emergency power supply and fuel after power outage. And the transmission cable could be cut by landslide, falling bridge, road collapse, or else. And the others, such as entrance to mobile base station and access to users, could be cut by falling trees, flying, or else. For disaster prevention and mitigation, so major telecommunication carrier in Japan take basically 3 actions. First one is ensuring emergency communications. And the second one is improvement of reliability of telecom network. And the last one is early recovery of telecom network. Among the 3 actions, from the viewpoint of resilience, I would like to focus on early recovery of telecom network, especially for mobile service. It's because our daily life has been depending on mobile service increasingly. Therefore, the importance for residents in affected area has been growing. In addition, 5G is coming. So actually by major telecom carriers such as NTT Group, mobile first has become a policy for early response. The next page. This is case of Hokkaido Eastern Iburi earthquake. As you know, pie chart on upper right shows the main cause of off-the-air mobile station is power outage. It is same as Typhoon 15 in September 2019. Then please see transitive graph on lower. Around 3 a.m. On September 6, the earthquake, which measured maximum 7 on the Japanese intensity scale, also its magnitude is around 7 occurred. Then soon after the earthquake, the blackout power outage all over Hokkaido came. Then, as you can see, a lot of mobile base stations have been suspended. The peak of the number is around 21 p.m. However, as you could see the area map in center, which from NTT Docomo, and almost similar to other 2 mobile carriers in Japan, the gray area where service is not available was small relatively. This is because of early recovery of telecom network by power supply vehicle, on vehicle mobile station, and portable mobile base station, also portable power generator, and so on. The next case is a heavy rain event on July 2020 this year. As bar chart on upper right shows, the main cause of the air mobile station is disconnection of transmission cable. It's different from Hokkaido case and Typhoon 15. Next, please see transitive graph on lower left side. Before daylight on July 4th, at least training occurred 9 times for 6 days. So therefore, different from earthquake and typhoon cases, the peak of the off-the-air mobile base station is reached over more days than such cases as 1 or 2 days by earthquake or typhoon. In addition, please see the...
Could you keep going to your conclusions, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just a moment. Okay, in addition, please see the other transitive graph on lower right, which is for telecom buildings. So by landslide flood, many telecom buildings are destroyed and backbone transmission network were cut. Therefore, as you could see the green arrows on both graphs, recover of many telecom buildings by detour route by optical cable and replacement of broken cable could make early recovery of many mobile base stations connected to those telecom buildings successful. This might be a kind of example which mobile first operation become event. Okay, so maybe I took a little bit longer time. So just okay, example which we experienced in Japan recently, I want to share with all of you. Okay, please proceed next.
Thank you very much. I think that we're gonna have more time during the Q&A part of our session, so you could add more examples. Thank you for your rich presentation. We are glad that Mr. Américo Muchanga could join us, so I would give the floor to him. He's the president of ARECON, the Mozambican Communications Regulatory Authority. Thank you for joining us. You have 6 minutes, please, Mr. Muchanga.
Thank you, Beatrice, for welcoming me to this session. And I'm sorry that I'm only able to join very late. I wish to say good afternoon or good morning or good evening to all the participants in this session. I see Alison, I see Pablo, I see Taish, and I see many that I know from other meetings. I wish to say that this particular issue that we are dealing with of telecommunications in emergency situation, it's an issue that for us, it's very important. As you know, last year we were struck in less than a month by 2 powerful cyclones. One that affected the central area of Mozambique, and while the second one affected the northern region of Mozambique. What we learned in particular from the first cyclone is that on the following day, since it had a landfall during the night, on the following day, we had no communication at all, not only in the city of Beira, but also in all the central region of Mozambique. Most of the base stations were brought down, even in situations where the base station was there, but the antenna, the tower was there, but the base station itself, it has been flooded or broken, or the power equipment was not operational. In some places, the telecommunication infrastructure was even there, but the electricity has been taken down. So all in all, there was no communication. And what we learned is that when you have that situation, first we have the problem that the people are unable to know the situation of the other person. So they don't know if a person is alive, they don't know which kind of help they can provide, but also the emergency services, like the National Institute of Disaster Management, it has no way of coordinating the efforts as well. In our case, the INGC, the entity that manages disaster, they had relocated to a different area that they knew that it was not going to be affected. So they were outside of the area that was going to be affected, but when they started moving toward the city to provide some help, they found that the bridges were broken. So they couldn't move, by road. It was not possible to go via airline as well because the airport had been affected as well. So it was really a very terrible situation. So we learned then they had to manage, to find ways to quickly fix the bridge so that there could be some road connection, to the affected area. And we learned that it's important when you have those situations to already have a kit, a satellite-based kit that you can quickly deploy to provide some sort of communication. So if we were prepared beforehand, we could have located in the areas, in this case in the city of Beira, some satellite equipment that would enable the communication between the people located in Beira and the INGC institution, or at least, the area where the relief was organized in order to provide the support to the other side. So what we learned, after the disaster that we had in Mozambique, is that it's very important not only that we prepare for the disaster by building infrastructure that can be resilient to a certain type of cyclones, but also we need to have telecommunication infrastructure that we know, things like radios that operate on HF or satellite equipment that we can at least use to coordinate the relief, and also for the telecommunication operators to have emergency kits that they can use to restore the communications immediately. Fortunately, the three major operators in Mozambique that were affected by the cyclones, they were able to rebuild the network, I'd say, quite swiftly, because on a day 5, at least they managed to recover in the Beira city around 40% of the telecommunication network. It wasn't enough for most of the communications, but at least it was possible then to know what is happening in each of the places, for people at least to send messages saying that they are okay or which kind of help they need, etc., etc. So it's really difficult, but there are lessons learned, and I think we need to be able to be prepared in such a way that when new disasters come, we are ready to act swiftly. So later on, when we come to discussion, I'll be able to share what Mozambique has done, or is doing such, know that it will come one day, we just don't know when. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Americo. If you would like to have 2 more minutes to move forward this topic, it's okay. We still have time, but it's up to you. If you want to need it for the Q&A session part, is okay.
I'll share later on during the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will give the floor now to Pablo Rodriguez, Executive Vice President at NICPR from Puerto Rico, that would share with us the experience that you have during the disasters in the country. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It is a great honor to have an opportunity to share with you the experiences that we've had, especially in the past couple of years. I will move very quickly to the next slide. Bear with me.
President Trump declared an emergency today in Puerto Rico.
Residents were warned to brace for the worst.
Culebra fue una de las islas municipios que recibió los.
Can you hear the audio?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Fuertes vientos del huracán Irma.
Maria, expected to become a hurricane later on, its path is actually following the path of Irma.
Puerto Rico está enfrentando por primera vez en unos 85 años un huracán categoría 5.
Que aquí hay que evacuar, hay que hacer desalojo, dejándole saber a todos los ciudadanos que esto es un peligro.
No lights. It is dark, entirely dark. And apparently it could take months to get the power back on. Just think about that for a second in the modern world, months with no power.
Imagine that, months with no power. For the first 7 or 10 days, our island, as seen from satellites, we were completely blacked out. no lights, no power lines, no cell phones, no radio, no television, nothing. But what happened to that PR? The registry.pr was operational 100% before, during, and after the hurricane, because we made provisions to have 2 collocations that were bunkers that could safeguard our DNS. In addition to that, we also had Anycast technology deployed in several parts of the world. At that time, we had it in Germany, and now we also have in Latin America through LACTLD. Something that I would like to share with you is this picture. In the picture above is what Puerto Rico looked like from the International Space Station prior to the hurricane. Now look at the bottom picture. 26 days around, the hurricane hit us around September 20th. So on September 26, 95% of the island still had no electricity, barely had running water. And in addition to that, most of our cell towers were down. Out of 1,386 cell towers were completely down. There was nothing that could help us out. Cable was attached to these electrical poles. In addition to that, cell towers also carry many of the antennas for connectivity. And you could see over and over again pictures like this. I remember that as I was moving, I passed the hurricane with my in-laws in the center of the island. As I was returning to the capital, to San Juan, I began to see towers completely mangled, completely twisted in such a way that it was unthinkable for me that something like this could occur, that such a hurricane had such power. It was amazing to me. Destruction all over the place. But you know what? The one thing that we realized, the one thing that I learned is that the Latin American and Caribbean regions are highly vulnerable to natural disasters. Pretty much like Mr. Hajime mentioned, we are also vulnerable to hurricanes, to earthquakes, to tsunamis, to volcanoes. So much so that, look at this. This picture is from an earthquake that took effect in Mexico 24 hours before Hurricane Maria hit us. Hurricane Maria was one of 2 Category 5 hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico within 13 days. Irma attacked many of the islands, like Antigua and Barbuda and so many other islands. And as we were taking people from those islands, we were hit 13 days later. Previously to that, Mexico was going through that. Guatemala at the time was going through the volcanoes. So we had lessons learned. And yes, indeed, we had lessons learned also from what happened in Japan in 2011. You would think, well, why is that? Why Puerto Rico is on the other side of the world from Japan? So why would that be an inspiration to us? Because we have many customers, and we have many customers that have very important cyber real estate. Imagine all those domain names like Fujitsu, Sony, Canon, Toyota, Honda, on and on and on and on. What are you going to do about that from the perspective of a CCTLD as we are? So what we did is that we extended our renewal process. Why? Because there was no way that they could contact us to tell me, please renew my domain name. Oh, and by the way, here is payment. I will send you an electronic payment. There is no way that they could send us money from Japan here or from anywhere in the world, right? So it was important for us, and it was our responsibility to protect our customers. So what we did was that we renewed their domain names for a year. And then We expect in good faith that when they are ready, they will send us the payment. And indeed, that was the case. So what is it that we propose? We propose that in 2017, we learned from what we have done for our customers in Japan and in other parts of the world that had been hit by natural disasters, that we went through our databases and we looked out for all the domain names in the regions that were affected, and we renew them automatically. And then we expect that we would receive payment in due time whenever it was able for them. It was more important to make sure that their cyber real estate was up rather than to allow them to lose their domain names and their websites and all of the other information and services that they provide to their respective constituencies. So what do we propose? We propose that registry operators throughout the world, as natural disasters occur, do not think that because you're far away from there, it's not your responsibility or you have nothing to do. Please make sure that your databases, that you check your databases, and if you have any customers from those areas, you can take care of them, and that you can renew those domain names and ensure that they do not lose their cyber real estate. Thank you very much. Should you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask or contact me at pablo@nic.pr. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez, and thank you for sharing the videos and the pictures. At the time in 2017, I remember watching the news about the hurricane, but recovering our memory on it is amazing. And all of our solidarity to people from Puerto Rico, and congratulations for you and your team for facing and putting everything online after all. Thank you so much for your work. So we move forward now with the presentations and the contributions from the representatives from the two organizations that are proposing this workshop, that is the Brazilian National Telecommunications Agency, Anatel, and after that from the Brazilian Steering Committee. So I'll give the floor now for Thais Nifinegger from Anatel. And for those of you who join us after the beginning of our session, we are organizing our debate around two main policy questions: is how do we keep up with appropriate developments of tools and technologies and infrastructure to be resilient under severe circumstances, and also what are the risks and opportunities in leveraging the digital ecosystem as a whole when tackling emergency situations. So please, Thais, 6 minutes.
Okay, do you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you, Bia, for the introduction. And given the short time, I'll try to be as brief as I can and provide you with a bit of our view from the telecom regulator in Brazil and a bit of our past experience in Brazil as well. So it's not by chance that you see in my background the Inhotim Institute here, which is the biggest open-air museum in the world, and which is located in the municipality of Brumadinho in Brazil, where we had a big incident last year, unfortunately. I'm going to talk about this case later on. So we do not suffer from earthquakes and tsunamis like Japan, or cyclones like Mozambique or Puerto Rico, but we still struggle every year with heavy tropical rains, sometimes the lack of them, fires, and other sort of disasters. Looking at our role as regulators, in particular during this unprecedented global health crisis, it is clear that internet is indeed essential. There's no doubt about it. And what we need to do to create the conditions for the services to be deployed and for the consumers to have access to it is to fully support the infrastructures and put in place policies that can respond to the needs of the society. So having said that, it is our role to implement a national emergency telecommunication plan, including overall risk assessment, national disaster management plan, and applicable legislation and regulation. And those rules need to be flexible enough to respond to emergency situations timely. As an example, due to the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen in many countries, policymakers and regulators granting permanent or temporary spectrum licenses in the context of the pandemic. These additional spectrum licenses allow operators to provide their customers with better network access, or to improve quality of service, or even to improve connectivity for specific sectors like healthcare, when and where needed. So we could see that easing regulatory requirements or licenses is also a tool that have been proven to be quite effective for granting more connectivity. In March this year, the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, proposed a bunch of guidelines for emergency telecommunications plans. In this important document, they suggest that regulators have flexible rules and that operators have their own plans to guarantee at least the functioning of emergency communications. According to the ITU, an efficient national telecommunications emergency plan should outline the strategy that guarantees the existence of services throughout the disasters mitigation and the permanent exchange of information with the authorities. In addition, companies and regulators need to be prepared in advance, so they need to get used to running simulations and tests before disasters occur. Just for you to have an idea, the regional disasters history shows that disasters have affected about 400 million people in the past 50 years in the Americas region. Mostly related to climate and environmental events. Our main regulation for emergency communications in Brazil, ruled by Anatel, include three main themes, which are risk management of critical telecommunications infrastructure, monitoring the performance of telecommunications networks, and preparedness and response measures for disasters, emergency situations, or public calamity state. Measures taken also include installation of terminals and shelters or in strategic locations, notifications of alerts, alarms, and guidance to users located in municipalities at risk, all of this free of charge by mobile and pay TV services providers. Counting from May last year, we also started implementing SMS alerts sent by the civil defense to the local population, and this can be quite helpful in preventing and mitigating disasters. I'd like to share with you a couple of slides I have about the case I want to talk to you about, which is the Brumadinho case, which happened last year in Brazil. So let me know if you can see my screen. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes? Okay,
yes.
Good. So this emblematic case happened in Brazil last year, and it's a good example on how our communication system operated and responded, being able to mitigate the effects of the disasters. So Brumadinho is a Brazilian municipality in the state of Minas Gerais, where I come from, in the southeast region of the country. It is located in the metropolitan region of Belo Horizonte, and it has a population of about 4,000 people. Its main economic base is supported by the mining activity, mainly by the company Vale. The Brumadinho Dam disaster occurred on 15 January last year, when the main dam located in Córrego Feijão iron mine suffered a catastrophic failure. So this is the region, as you can see. And the dam is owned by this company, Vale, the same company that was involved 4 years before in another disaster. So this is the region before the accident. The collapse of the dam occurred just after noon in 15 January. And a telecommunications crisis cabinet was established and coordinated by the telecom regulator just 1 hour and a half after the rupture of the mine dam. Here you can see a few pictures after the collapse of this dam. It was then established a permanent interaction with the service providers to evaluate, reestablish, repair, and maintain the communications in the region, and to ensure the functioning of the telephone signal and the mobile data communications, even with the interruption of the electricity supply. So here's another picture. You can see the damage. Several measures were taken. Mobile 4G station in band 28 in 700 megahertz was also established for emergency communication service. Roaming was available to make calls from any antenna in there, regardless the provider, which was also very, very important. The cell phone carriers distributed about 300 SIM cards to the affected population and members of the civil defense. In addition, to improve efficiency of the victims' rescue, call details records were then made available for the government agents to identify the location of the mobile devices of the local population. It helped a lot in trying to find the people that were in danger by them. And in addition to that, satellite communications controlled by the state-owned company Telebras, operating in the Ka band, covered the entire region and were also made available to ensure communication during the whole process. And
please, Thais.
Sorry, 1 minute. Okay,
yes.
Right. I'm gonna move to the conclusion so we have time to discuss after that. And okay, so this is the scenario and the communications that were in place by them. And then the lessons learned so far from this accident and also from other past incidents were that the process has proven to be effective with fast and pertinent interactions via WhatsApp by the agents that were working there. The response was improved with previous smaller scale experiences. That is also very, very important. And it is also important to have delimited the communication matrix, meaning the contact persons in charge of these situations and the process to be followed, network mapping, survey of what was destroyed, and etc. And it's also important that providers send daily monitoring reports with network operating status to the government. The process should also be evaluated and improved for each performance for future reference. And what we know by now is that we need more simulation exercise, that's for sure. And a last step, which is also very, very important, is that international cooperation also helps a lot in exchanging best practice. We can learn a lot from others' experiences, and I think that's what we are trying to do right now. And as my colleagues also highlighted before me, and we need data from other governments, and it can, of course, mitigate the effects on our own countries when disasters occur here. So having said that, I finish my speech. Looking forward to discussing and learning from you. Thank you, Bia.
Thank you very much, Thais. Thank you for sharing the pictures as well from Brumadinho. We have one more presentation to go, and we encourage everybody to send your questions through the Q&A tool. Please feel free to participate. I would like to share some comments from Carlos Afonso, our Brazilian colleague from, he's a MAG member from the civil society from Rio de Janeiro. He wrote in the chat that the presentation from our compañeros de Puerto Rico, a huge disaster basically ignored by the federal US government, to remind us Brazilians that a state in Brazil at this real moment, Amapá, went dark without any electricity because the transnational private operation Isolux, which operates the link from the national interconnected system, one of the most reliable in the world, went dark due to a massive failure in its facility. Isolux is a private company from Spain that had no spare parts, no replacement device, and had to be helped by the state company Telebras in Brazil. So Amapá is still with no electricity except for a few hours per day, which are rotated every 6 hours to the 16 municipalities of the state. So thank you for your comment, Carlos Afonso. And I'll give the floor to Demi Getchko, CEO of NICBR Brazil.
Yeah, for the presentation. I thank the organizers and the IGF for inviting me to be part in this very interesting panel on this critical theme, especially in these pandemic times. First, I will begin with a brief explanation of internet governance in Brazil. Maybe I have some slides here. Yes, okay, here are the slides. Next one, please. Okay, we have an interesting model here in Brazil since '95. It's quite unique, but really not unique. But it's important that we have a very strong multi-stakeholder model with government, private sector, academia, and civil society equally presented in the Brazilian Steering Committee. And we are, of course, set for transparency and democracy, and we'll try to achieve effective participation of society and sustainability, innovation, and technical quality. Thank you. The next one, please. Okay, this is the composition of the Brazilian Steering Committee. As you can see, at the left part, we have the representatives from the government, and on the right part, we have civil society representatives that were elected each 3 years. We just completed the fully new members of the civil society representation, and the CGI is now full and working well. Next one, please. Okay, the operational hand of the steering society of the Brazilian Steering Internet Committee is the NICBR, the Network Information Center of .br. NICBR began with more or less the .br registration in '89, but gained strength when we began to have our own resources around 2005. After that, we could in some way return to the internet community the resources again through the .br registration. We are quite known CCTLD. We are reaching 4.5 million domains registered in 2 days. We are reaching this number. And we have, of course, some surplus of resources to develop infrastructure things, of course, oriented by CGI-BR in order to have a strongest internet in Brazil. NICBR has some arms here. You can see the security arm, the CertBR, the statistics arm, the CETIC, the research arm, CEPTRO, and I want to talk about the PTT in this event. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the mission of the CGI. I will leave for further consideration later. I go right to the next point. Next, please. Okay, we have heard a lot about the critical resources that supports the people under hard circumstances when they have calamities and other problems. I will change the theme to a more soft layer, and we will talk a little bit about internet, not about the infrastructure of power, of electricity, of telecom, that of course is critical and is needed to have internet. But let's take a look in the layer, internet layer theme, to see what we can do to have a stronger internet in these situations. I began with index that is delivered each year. And for us, it's very optimistic because in the first time, Brazil is in the first position of the most tolerant countries around internet segment reliability. What this means? This doesn't mean that we have the best internet infrastructure or telecom infrastructure or power infrastructure, but we are less prone to have resilience problems because we are very well distributed. We have lots of small players, lots of interconnections, a mesh structure that increases redundancy and availability of paths. And in this case, we have a situation that we are less prone to have a disaster because a major player for some reason fails or we have a big disruption in some infrastructure. Then it was, of course, it was for us very happy news to see that we reached this position. This map more or less shows the different 20 countries in this map. Next please. One way we try to achieve this resilience is to spread the number of independent networks in Brazil, the autonomous system. As you can see, we have a lot of autonomous systems. We have 70% of the autonomous system in Latin America and Caribbean located in Brazil, because in some way, NICBR is struggling to let all the people in this area know how important and how good it is to be an autonomous system. Next one, please. This is the growth of autonomous system. In Brazil, we have more than 8K autonomous systems here. Next, please. Other point of distribution is the service providers in Brazil. The most part of internet service providers in Brazil are small or micro companies with 1 to 50 persons employed, and they are quite well distributed through the regions. Next one, please. And we have also a good infrastructure of optic submarine cables coming to the country. Next one, please. Then I will talk a little bit about internet exchanges and how it can help to be more reliable in this area. As you know, Brazil has a big area. You see we have really densities of thousands of kilometers. And all these points you can see in this map are internet exchanges established and managed by NICBR and in some way contributing to have a big diversity distribution. By the way, this is one of the original concepts of the internet. Internet was conceived to be a distributed network without a center point of failure, without a critical dependence of any infrastructure. And it's good to have in mind that these are very good principles. We have to stick to them if we want to have a reliable internet. Next one, please. We have this is just to show that we have a profile change during these years with the beginning of the entertainment at home using movies and using streaming at late hours. The internet way of exchange changed its shape, and actually the peak is around 20 p.m., 22 p.m., 8 p.m. to 22 p.m. Next one, please. This is more or less the growth of the traffic of the PTT. The PTT is the name we call the internet exchanges. The point of exchange of traffic in Brazil. This is the São Paulo exchange, and you have another good news on that. São Paulo exchange also surpassed the Frankfurt exchange in July, and we are the biggest point of internet exchange actually. Next one, please. Next one, please. Okay, as you can see, between the 12-month and the 12 week and 13 week, we have a big increase in traffic, of course, because of the rush to have your services and your communications all through the digital way because of the COVID. Next one, please. If you see next one, and next one, yeah, you see in 50 days, in 15 days, less than a month, we have a big increase in traffic in this São Paulo Internet Exchange just because of COVID. Next one, please. Here you have a comparative look of distribution of autonomous system numbers in IPv6 in Latin American region, just to show you that it's important to really put a lot of strength in trying to grow the numbers of autonomous systems and the distribution of the infrastructure to the country. The next one, please. And just to finish this, I also want to stress the importance to look forward going to the IPv6 actually. The next one, please. This is the situation of IPv6 in the world. We are growing, growing slowly in the world, reaching around 35% now. Next one, please. And you can see, for example, some countries are better than that. India reached 47% of IPv6. Next one. United States at 41. Next one. And Brazil, we are around 35%. This is also good numbers. We are doing quite well on that. Just to summarize then what I am trying to say. Next one, I think we have. Okay, this is the growth of use of IPv6 in Brazil, and we have also produced some books and some courses on that. Next one. This is material for laboratory, and we can distribute this for free for everyone to be aware of the importance and the necessity to migrate to IPv6. Next one. And finally, I think that to have really an internet strong and safe, you have to have a transversal program, a cross program around all the areas for a better and safer internet. We put together all the areas in NICBR and all the segments of the society to build a site where we put the best practices available to everybody and try to steer the internet to a safer situation. Then what I want to finish is to remember that the internet was built by thousands of independent networks, and we have to keep in mind that it's very important to have this distribution and not to concentrate the power and the connectivity in some single big points around the net. Unfortunately, this is the way they are going more or less now, but we have to recover the initial idea to distribute end-to-end connectivity. Anyone can connect with any other and not to live in walled gardens that, of course, causes a lot of instability and lack of security. Thank you very much. I'm available for questions after that.
Thank you very much, Demi. Thank you for the presentation and for everything that NICBR does for us in Brazil. We have some questions here, and we encourage people that are participating in the sessions to send more questions. We still have some time. I would start with Américo. We received a question from Herman and Ramos. He said that, first of all, it's good to see my country, Mozambique, being represented in such important event. And the question is, talking about internet infrastructure in emergencies, it's important to understand how rural communities are prepared to this situation and how we can ensure in what is being done to guarantee that those places are connected for a good responses in emergency cases. So, Mr. Muchanga, if you could please address the question regarding the rural areas during these situations, please.
Thank you. I wish to say that when it comes to emergency situation or a disaster, both rural as well as urban areas, they almost share the same type of risk, in the sense that typically after a cyclone, for instance, this is the typical disaster that we get in Mozambique. We don't get too much severe earthquakes. The area of Mozambique is not that at very risk. By cyclone years, because we have a 3,000 coast along the Mozambican Channel. And in particular, the northern area of Mozambique, it's prone to the cyclones because it's already above of Madagascar, who usually shelters our coast, from big cyclones. Now, I think when it comes to how you deal with a disaster, a rural area typically will have, say, a telephone network that can be used for communication. But after a cyclone, most likely that network will not be available. Most likely after a cyclone, the roads will not be usable because a cyclone normally will come with a lot of rain that usually will flood the roads as well, will break the bridges, etc. So when you prepare for disaster, you need to make sure that or to have in mind that after that disaster, that typical traditional infrastructure of communication, it won't be there, that you won't have electricity, etc. So the question here is, what did you do? And I want to share here what we have learned, what we have done after the 2 cyclones that we had last year in Mozambique. The first thing that we decided is that there's a need to do some sort of risk assessment and map the areas that are likely to be hit by a cyclone of the same category as the Idai and Kenneth that we had in Mozambique last year. And usually when a cyclone of this magnitude comes, it means that it will make a landfall and it may go as far as 200 kilometers inland and continue making destruction. So in those areas, say in most of the cities are located around the sea, I said that what we have decided in Mozambique is that we need to map those areas and we need to ensure that we construct certain infrastructures that are strong enough to be resilient to, say, a category 5 cyclone. So typically you need to have few schools that are strong enough, to sustain category 5 cyclones. Not because you want to continue with the lectures afterwards, but normally because schools are the places that you can use to shelter people after a disaster. You need to have certain buildings within a hospital or healthcare center that are also resilient, because typically in a disaster, you will have people that will be wounded during the disaster, and you need to have a place where you can actually treat the people. So this is part of the plan, that we will need to have certain buildings, certain schools that are constructed in such a way that they are strong enough, and to have certain areas of the hospital, not the entire hospital, but certain areas of the hospital that are strong enough to sustain, say, category 5 cyclone, so that you have the area where you can treat people. The third thing that we decided there's a need to have is that certain telecommunication infrastructure, it has to be resilient to a cyclone. So you don't have to build your entire network to be strong enough to be resilient to all kinds of cyclone, but you need to have certain base stations that they are built to sustain very strong winds, such that you can have at least some sites operational after a cyclone. Apart from that, what we decide is that regional governments, they need to have some sort of HF communications network, because typically HF can reach very long distance and requires just a battery, a local battery, to be able to make a communication. So we are now in the process of looking for that kind of equipment that will be given to local governments, so such that when there's a disaster, at least after disaster, you have some form of communication with that area. Also, we mandated the telecommunication operators to acquire some kit, satellite-based kit, that they can use to restore minimum communication. You don't need to have communication for everyone in the city, but at least you need to have a communication that can be used by the disaster relief efforts to be able to communicate with the city, with other cities, and ask for certain type of help and support. So we want operators to be able to have those kits located in the region such that when you know that a cyclone is coming, you can quickly move that equipment to that particular area. One lesson that we learned is that don't think that after the disaster, you will have the airport operational or the port operational, that you will have the roads operational. So you need to prepare for assuming that you may not have the roads available. So although you want to locate some of the relief outside of the affected area, but you need to have some capacity in the area for situation in which the roads are broken so that you can start on the following day to provide some relief. Also assume that you may not have fuel as well. In Beira, for instance, because Beira is an area that it quickly gets flooded, we found that after disaster, even the fuel stations were flooded. So you couldn't even put fuel in your car if you didn't have the fuel in the car already. So if a disaster is coming, you need to stock some sort of fuel in the cars, etc., to be able to power or to be able to power a generator or to be able to power your car after the disaster. So those are some of the things I would like to share and to say that this is valid for both the urban areas as well as rural areas, because they all suffer from the same typical problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Americo. We have 3 more questions. I'd like to send this one to Hajime Onga, and so you can have some more time to conclude your presentation at the beginning. We received a question from Susan Sanders. She's asking if in building public buildings and homes in areas prone to natural disasters, there is frequently a requirement that constructions be designed and implemented to withstand these disasters. Do contracts for building, power, and sanitation plants and communications infrastructure also include clauses that the structure must be able to withstand natural disasters known to occur in the area? I would imagine it would be more expensive upfront, but long-term could be more efficient. So if you could please comment. Can you see the question? Can you read the question, Olga?
Okay, now I'm reading the question.
It's the last one.
Okay. Okay, but I'm not sure it's helpful, this question, but okay, just a moment. My slide is. Can you see my slide?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So a kind of lesson from our experience. So we take action like these 5 items. So maybe the first one is a kind of answer for the question. So recently we revised the guideline for telecom operators. So for example, okay, so at least 24 hours is required for mobile base station and telecom building covering, for example, city hall or a prefecture office, because headquarters for disaster response is supposed to be set up when disaster occurs. So now we try to coordinate with telecom carrier to make them, power resources more longer. Okay. Is it okay?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, then this is a kind of answer to the question. And if I have more time, I would like to share of my lesson from our experience in recent natural disaster. I think the most important thing is the readiness and cooperation system among public and private sectors is essential. In order for the second one, relief and safety of affected residents and the facilitation of recovery activities. So concretely by the conventional equipment as well as the innovative and collaborative solution. So please let me introduce some example of the innovative solutions recently introduced in Japan. Then this is some example. So for example, on drone base station and HAPS system is not yet in operation, now in trial basis. But on the other hand, on balloon base station and on ship base station and cable layer ship to deliver some equipment to the affected area, they are already introduced in Japan. So I hope this example helpful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Onga, Mr. Onga. We're gonna, we have another questions from Carlos Afonso from Brazil to Thais. He mentioned that your presentation was crucial, Thais. The communities need from Anatel strong support to enable them to use the spectrum creatively, building community networks, using the new technologies to allow for spectrum sharing, secondary use, deployment of allocation database to enable local use of white spaces without infringing on the rights of the big telcos and so on. So he asks if, he says that community needs the help of Anatel to facilitate this. And he asks if you could give us a perspective of the agency on this matter.
So thank you, Carlos, for your question. And we are very much aware that we need to have creativity to deal with our own challenges. And we are aware of that. And Anatel is doing a huge effort to try to ease the regulations to foster community and small providers to be part of the market, and also to have crowd sourcing solutions for our problems. And we are also studying and considering regulatory sandboxes to be viable to our environment here. And this is something that might happen in the near future. And about TV white spaces, we have already had a public consultation on that. And the regulation is in a final stage of being elaborated. So we are gonna have the implementation of that in the near future as well. And that's what I can tell you at the moment, that we are aware and that we are working on that. And we are very sensitive to all of these suggestions you had. Thank you.
Thank you, Thais. Please, Pablo, go ahead.
Thank you, Beth. And excellent presentations for all the expositors. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. I concur with Americo with regarding the need for a satellite station. That was something that made a big difference here during Hurricane Maria. After it occurred, we found that we had no way of communicating with each other, at least, as Americo pointed out, with those organizers of the aid. So the first thing that we received was satellite telephones in specific areas so that you could coordinate the distribution of aid, medicine, food, water, and so on. The other thing that was really important was fuel. And in that moment, diesel power was necessary because the collocations which we were using, their power generators depended on that diesel fuel. So if we ran out of diesel fuel, we would have just completely dropped out of the spectrum. So that is also very, very important. And finally, I would like to take the opportunity to address partially the question that Susan was asking regarding what about regulation regarding the construction of buildings and so on. Yeah, that is true. Many cities and many countries, and Puerto Rico included, have very strong building codes. But what do you do with those buildings that were constructed 200 years ago, 100 years ago, where those codes did not exist? And they're very historical buildings and so on. We cannot destroy them and reconstruct them to code. So we have a problem with that. Furthermore, we also have a problem with those constructions that were built somewhat illegally, or at least out of code, and in areas where a family from many years ago had a very extensive piece of land, and throughout the year has been dividing that piece of land for a son, for a grandson, for the nephew, and so on. And all of these houses are built, but they're not built to code. And they're in the middle of the mountains, right? So now you have houses that are not built to code, that are old, and when a natural disaster occurs, they are the first places where you need to go and help them in very inaccessible areas. So that is something that the government now has to start looking into it, and that was part of our experience. So now we have to find creative ways to address those individuals and to find ways and to tell them, well, now that the house was destroyed, let's rebuild, but let's rebuild to code. So that is part of those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. I think I see that Alison wants to comment as well, but I would add a question, Alison. So if you could please comment both of them. I was thinking about send this one to you that we received from our audience. Are these emergencies able to have an impact on the future of the internet? So if you please could comment on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And that actually does lead into what I was really wanting to say. And I was just saying, you know, these examples that have been given are so important. And I think such enormous progress has been made on dealing with natural disasters in these areas, and we've learned so much. But I did want to highlight, you know, if we are talking about critical infrastructure as the assets that are that are necessary for the functioning of society and economy, then the pandemic presents slightly different problems for us from a policy point of view. To these obviously need to carry on for these kinds of natural disasters, but building on some of the stuff that Demi was speaking about and the points I was making earlier, you know, this really requires more systemic engagement if we are going to prepare ourselves for the next pandemic. The fact that people are unable to mitigate through digital substitution, remote work, their schooling, their banking, all of those things really mean that we're not prepared for the next pandemic. So we have to reduce those costs. We have to get more people online. And I think that's what was important about what Demi was saying, that we actually have to get better systems in place. We actually have to get the distributed networks in place. We have to get better competition, less concentration, lower prices. You know, we have to get the internet as it was planned to work better, to mitigate the negative consequences of these pandemics, which we see are inevitable and going to be coming again. And I think on that note, I've got a very big dog who's had enough Zoom, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, making a big noise.
No, it's totally okay, Alison. Thank you very much. Also, Pablo, we have 7 more minutes to close the session. So I'll give you the floor for your final comments and your final considerations, and then I'm gonna start with the reverse order from the beginning. I will start with Demi then, and I would I ask you to please stay in 1-2 minutes maximum, so we can listen to everybody before closing the session. Demi.
Thank you so much, Bea, for the opportunity.
Pablo, Pablo, just a second. We're going to start with Demi, and then I will move forward and I'll call you, okay? Thank you. Demi, please.
Okay, thank you again. I agree totally with the last comments, and I want to say that if you look at the decalogue of the CGI, the decalogue we did some years ago, we are trying to preserve and to maintain the original concepts of the internet. I'm totally in favor of how the internet was conceived many years ago, and of course we are a little bit worried where the things are going now. Then I think we have to strive to have this distributed network with this open competition to everybody, and the communication one-to-one as it was the main and original goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Demi. Thais, please.
Okay, so I'd like to summarize saying that connectivity is crucial. We can see from all the speeches here, and it also depends on strong infrastructure. And apart from that, we need more integration, not only between authorities in our own countries, but in between ourselves in different countries from different stakeholders and different point of views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thais. Pablo, please.
Thank you, Bea. The one thing that is important to continue to have this type of panels and to involve decision makers at all levels, from the government, from academia, from the private industry, so that they can begin to understand and coordinate in such a way that we can address all the different problems, challenges that we have. Unfortunately, not all countries are created equal. Not all countries have the same resources, and we all have different priorities. And while connectivity and internet and pandemic are important, there are other lagging problems that we also carry that must also be addressed with limited resources. So it is important to get government involved. It is important to get academia involved. It is important to get private industry involved so that we can all be on the same plane. And once again, thank you all for inviting me here. It has been a great honor to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pablo. Hajime, please, your final considerations.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this chance to join this informative discussion with your real experience. So lastly, just I want to say that, the next March is the 10th anniversary of the Great Eastern Japan earthquake. So please let me express our sincere gratitude once again for a lot of support from overseas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and all our solidarity to the Japan people as well. Américo, please.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. What I want to say is that an emergency is, of course, an emergency. It means that it's always unexpected. But if we plan ahead of time, we are likely to minimize the impact of the disaster. So what I would like to call upon is that each of the participants here who lives in a country that's prone to a certain type of disaster, there is a need to have a coordinated plan that's known by all the relevant stakeholders so that the reaction to disaster doesn't start when, for instance, a cyclone is announced that it's coming. You need to have prepared them before. Here is that there is a need to have an infrastructure sharing. Typically in the telecom area is that when a disaster comes, will not strike the networks of all the operators in the same way. So you may have one or two operators that are up, but you will typically find that the customers that can use that network belong to another operator. So to have the ability of the operators to understand that we are working on a disaster environment and to be able to start allowing the subscribers from another operator to use its network, it's very important. So sharing infrastructure is a must normally, but typically in a disaster situation, it's an even bigger requirement. So those are some of the words that I would like to place here as a concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Américo. Alison, please. Don't worry about your dog. We like dogs.
Thank you. I was actually saying what I said before was really just to emphasize, that I think the pandemic presents slightly different challenge. Well, not slightly, significantly different challenges for us. And so I really think, it's incumbent on us to look at the national level of what we do to get digital inclusion so that people are actually able to mitigate these effects. In many parts of Africa, lockdowns could simply not be enforced because simply people would have starved to death. They couldn't get to clinics for help, etc. So if we're going to mitigate the effects of the next pandemic, we have to get more people online, more people able to mitigate the negative effects of the pandemic, and particularly the lockdowns, the economic lockdowns and the impacts. I mean, if we think of, these disasters we've been speaking about, months without electricity, these are all devastating consequences. But the pandemic now, we've had these negative consequences for a year. We have millions of people who've lost their jobs. The economy is destroyed entirely. We really have to have systemic solutions at the national level, but these will require global cooperation because, as I said, these are increasingly, these are global public goods, cybersecurity, data governance, data protection, the internet. These are public goods. People have to have universal access to them.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you very much, everyone. I think I've learned a lot during this 1 hour and a half with you. Thank you very much for all these amazing contributions and information that you share with us. I totally agree with you that we need to keep going with this kind of topics in the IGF. So thank you for IGF for hosting and receiving accepting the proposal for Anatel and from the CGI, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, for organizing this workshop here. I'd like to thank you as well to Vinicius, Everton, Juliano, all the team from the CGI in Brazil that are helping us organizing this. Thank you for the more than 40 people that were with us attending and being part of the audience of this workshop. And thank you for the CGI for having me hosting this conversation, and I wish you a good continuation for the IGF this week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Beatriz. All the best to everyone. Thais, Alison, Vinicius, thank you for making me and helping me to get into this. Because it's very cumbersome. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you all. Demi.
It was very good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thais, you have a very good background, eh?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.